Afternoon and welcome to the special meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission on September 29th, 2016. May I have a roll call, please?
Roll call. Commissioner Cognati is absent. Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Shire?
Here.
Commissioner Votanian?
Here.
And Chair Vidor?
Here.
Very good.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on or before Monday of this week, I believe, on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. And we do have some speakers lined up for today, so if anybody else wants to speak, please fill out a card and give it to Ms. Park. Approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any additions or corrections to the last minutes?
I have none.
None.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second.
Roll call on approval.
Roll call. Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Votanian?
Yes.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Chair Vidor?
Yes.
4-0.
Okay. The next topic is oral communications. I don't think we have any, so we'll move on to comments from commissioners. Do any of my fellow commissioners have a comment?
I do.
Yes.
I would like to thank our chairperson, Arlene Fedor, for the talk that she gave, Viva Glendale, who was up at Brand Library on September 15th, and it was excellent. I mean, I can't tell you, if you missed it, you really missed a great speech. And I have to say the place was packed. I mean, they had literally had people out in the aisles outside of the thing. So hopefully she'll give another talk so that everybody can see it, but it was great. So that's all I just wanted to say. I appreciate it, and I think everybody there went away smiling.
Thank you so much.
I concur. It was very entertaining, to say the least, and I really liked your Taco Bell bell parapet. I think that did it.
Yeah, I had to get a couple funnies in there just to keep the audience engaged. Anything from you?
Yeah, I wanted just to thank the Glendale Historic Society for putting on a great home tour on the Spanish architecture. It was well attended and some really good resources to see.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I know those are a lot of work to coordinate, so
Yes,
thank you
yes.
to the commissioners who volunteered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I volunteered, and as usual, it was wonderful and beautifully executed. So congratulations, Historical Society. I have a comment, which I'm going to read. We've had some email exchanges recently, so I thought I would just summarize this particular issue, and then we can just, I guess, move on from there. So, just to give you some background, on January 26, City Council authorized a request for proposal to pursue a contract to install new lampposts in Brand Park. Obviously a very necessary enhancement, as visitors often have trouble negotiating the stairways in the parking lot at night. And then on April 18th, an informational briefing on that was given to the Parks Commission by Parks staff, and Jess Duran apparently made the decision. He's the prior head of the Parks Department, to order quote-unquote historic replicas of the original lampposts. Yesterday, I was informed that the Parks Department is installing the new street lamps on October 13th. So that's coming up. In and around the park, they're going to be installed in front of the library, up and down the driveways leading off of Western and Grandview, and in various other places. The Departments of Water and Power, Community Parks, and Library Arts and Culture all had input into this project. However, HPC or the staff supporting HPC did not have input. Here's why I'm a little displeased about this. It's been our standard operating procedure for HPC to review and consult on any project adjacent to designated landmarks to ensure that any negative impacts are mitigated. The main landmark in Brand Park, Miradero, which translates to a high place overlooking a wide view, has as probably its most important defining feature the striking sight lines of the front facade as people approach, especially at night when many events take place at Brand Library. HPC has done consults on projects adjacent to the train depot, the Verdugo Adobe, YMCA, among other landmarks. For this particular project, the height, style of the standards, illumination quality, and placement of the lampposts in Brand Park should also have been reviewed by HPC prior to any such project being approved. Brand Library is probably the most photogenic and most photographed landmark in not only our city, but maybe the region as well, and one of the most striking and off-viewed at night. This is not a criticism of the decisions that were made, because we don't know what decisions were made, but I'm looking to shore up the process for making these types of decisions, and I'd like to propose we agendize a comprehensive informational update for the next HPC meeting, and Councilmember Freeman was very helpful today in facilitating getting that started, and I know that Mr. Ochoa is aware of it, so that we can at least see after the fact how the decisions were made and what decisions were made. And I propose that HPC have a written policy to ensure that relevant projects adjacent to designated landmarks are reviewed and recommendations made by the Historic Preservation Commission. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
And we will agendize the discussion for
Great, thank
October
you.
hearing. Written policy we'll have to talk about. That's probably more of an ordinance change than a
Yeah,
policy.
realize
The
that.
ordinance right now doesn't have any provision for that, so that's a bigger picture, but it's definitely worth talking about. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Could I ask why it was we were not even informed?
I can't answer that question.
Okay, I figured you couldn't, but I figured I would ask.
We have discussed that internally, and we hope we have a new director for the Parks Department. The Director of Community Development will be discussing this with him, and hopefully we can keep the communication channels a little more clear than they were obviously in this case.
And do you know, will they be historic lampposts?
I hope not, but they might be. It sounds like they will be.
Oh, okay.
I generally don't. Well, this is a personal thing, so and
Right,
it's not
here we go.
agendized, so we don't need
Yeah,
to
we-
discuss it. So
Right.
I'll be Alan Loomis and say, we must cut this discussion off.
that's right.
Okay. So, old business, we have none, so let's go right to new business now and start with 3620 Angeles Avenue.
And if you could, that's I thought you were going out of order, or another item is out of order.
Oh,
No,
was,
she just
It was
meant
just speaker cards.
oh, no,
Oh.
oh, no,
Come first
oh, no,
after
no,
each
I didn't
item.
want to change the order of the projects. I just, and I'll comment on that now, that I have, for two of the projects, I have two speakers, and one is Tim Gregory from the building biographer, so I will take his statement first, and then the owner of the project. That was the order thing.
If that's the owner's wish.
That was,
Yeah.
okay, great. Okay, so 3620 Angeles.
No, it's always on.
All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission. We have Glendale Register nominations for 3 very different properties today, and we've also got some fairly diverse backstories, so it should be an interesting evening. 3620 Angeles Avenue is located in the Montrose area, and it's one of less than 20 intact stone houses remaining in Glendale. The house was built and designed by an Italian immigrant by the name of Pio Benetti in 1931 or 1932. Benetti emigrated from Europe in 1922 with the intent, I think, of establishing a ranch in South America. That didn't pan out so well, and by the end of the year, he was already back in Southern California, establishing himself as a farmer. So Benetti and his brothers were also stonemasons, and they built a few properties. Not too much is known about them specifically, but it is known that there was a group of Italian stonemasons working in the Crescenta Valley at the time. So Benetti built this house for himself and his family in, like I said, in 1931, 1932, and they would reside there for just a few years until 1935. So this is Benetti with his wife, Angelica, obviously in later years. So he used a lot of native river rock in his construction. So the house is best described as vernacular with a few Spanish colonial revival influences, which you can see in the clay tile roof and the general fenestration patterns. The house is basically rectangular in plan with small projecting wings at the front facade. The walls are clad with natural stone with a little bit of rough stucco in the gable ends. The front features a recessed porch that has a low stone wall. The primary entrance is a single wood paneled door with a grill that we believe is original. There's a large tripartite floor-to-ceiling window that is of non-original material. It's not known whether that could have been an original entrance that was converted later into a window. The wings at the front facade have conical and gabled roofs, and each features a single arched picture window, again of replacement vinyl material. The north side of the house features shallow double gables and single and paired casement and hung windows. The openings do have their stone lintels intact, so we do know that the openings are original, although the material is not. A swimming pool runs parallel to the driveway, which leads to an attached garage. So pictured here are front and rear views of the garage, which is attached to the main dwelling by way of this little arched nook, which I think is one of the most interesting features of this property. The rear of the house is fairly simple. The main features are just paired, single hung and casement windows. And again, you see a rear view of that little arched nook. And the backyard also features a small terrace, and there are plenty of, I guess, intact retaining walls featuring that native stone as well. So the application suggests that the property might be significant for its association with Pio Bonetti. Our staff believes that although it's important to note the contributions of stone workers and construction workers in this era, which, you know, a lot of their histories tend to get forgotten in like the official city narratives. Not enough information has been presented to singularly identify Bonetti as a significant person in his own right. And so it might be worth future study, but at this time, staff believes that it's not significant under Criterion 2. Moving on to Criterion 3. The house is, like I said, one of the last remaining examples of stone construction in Glendale. This house was also identified, I should note, in the Stone House survey that was updated in 2010 as being individually eligible for the National Register. And that said, staff recommends to the Historic Preservation Commission that 3620 Angeles Avenue be added to the Glendale Register of Historic Resources as the Bonetti House, and to authorize a Mills Act contract between the property owner and the city. The commission may wish to consider Mills Act conditions, most notably the windows, which the current owners have expressed an interest in restoring. So we can go ahead and begin that discussion.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Christina Park? No?
Nope.
Okay, well then we can go to the public hearing, and the first speaker will be Tim Gregory.
Timmy boy.
I didn't realize this would be on the agenda, so I'm kind of winging it, but I think I'm glad it is, because I did want to accentuate how important I think this house is. So different from anything else I've ever seen in all the thousands of houses I've researched. As many of you know, La Crescenta used to be nicknamed Rock Crescenta because of all the rocks that were laying around on the ground, and the stonemasons would gather them up and build with them because it was natural material. And I think this is a really good example of using really natural material from the neighborhood. Probably, imagine they just probably dug them up from surrounding territory. And there's a great example of the stonemason's art. I think it's fantastic how the windows, the lintels and the sills of the windows are accentuated by the rock. As was mentioned, I think most of the windows have been replaced with acrylic windows, but the owner is very interested in getting them restored. And And most of the stonemasons were either French or Italian who came to this area. And although the Crescenta Valley does have quite a bit of stonework, especially in walls in some of their houses, but in Glendale they're pretty scarce, and I think this is another reason for significance is the fact that you just don't see them in the town very much. Any questions?
Okay, the next speaker is Kenneth Solinsky.
Okay.
There's two of you.
All right. Well, I didn't prepare for any long, boring speeches. I want to thank you for all.
To make this official,
Yes.
because we are official, state your name for the record and
Oh,
also
yes.
Ms. Solinsky.
Ken Solinsky, my wife Lorraine Solinsky, owners of the home, and so I haven't prepared any speeches, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, we really love the home. I guess we are learning more and more about the house as we live there, and people coming up in the neighborhood and telling us more stories and so forth. And it seems like we keep adding to the history, and it is such a unique home, as Mr. Gregory talked about. And I think as we're living there, it's only been maybe 9 months or so. There's an enthusiasm on seeing how we could preserve the home and enhance it, and just do some things that would just really make this a really nice historic home in the neighborhood. And I just love the architecture over the windows and some of the work. So just. Yeah. Is there anything you wanted to add to it?
I'm just admiring the picture here, thinking, this is our home? This is where we live?
It looks great on the screen.
It's a castle. It just looks like a castle to me, and it's a dream come true. I'm still in awe that we actually live in this home, because it is a very special home. And like Ken said, the more, as each day goes by, we're loving it and just falling in love with it, because it's special. I can't wait. I'm real antsy about just meeting some landscape designers to really kind of give it that Italian feel and bring those kinds of elements back to this home.
Yeah. It was really neat to see a picture. I'm glad that I don't know how you got that picture of the,
dug it up.
Yeah, the Benettis. And I expected him to be really tall and her to be really short, because we have 2 bathrooms. And one of the showers, literally, the head is here, and the other one is way up here. So it's just, but yeah, it was really neat to see them.
They
And,
must have really loved this home, because it is, I just can't even tell you, it is really.
Yeah, a lot of people, it's a very friendly dog neighborhood and walking neighborhood. Every day people walk up and down the block, and it's very common that people stop and look.
And they comment on the home and
Yeah.
really give us a lot of the information on the home. So we keep learning a lot of neat things about this home.
Do you have anything else? Do you guys have any questions for us?
Well, since we're going to be, when we close the public hearing, we're going to be talking about the landmark status as well as the Mills Act contract. I know that there was something in the report about your willingness, and you discussed the fact that you would convert the windows back to wood. And
Yes.
do you know what the window configurations were? Were they the same? I know we have plastic in now, but were the in terms of being, casement or double hung or whatever, is that a replication of what was there before? I know the material isn't, but in terms of the style of the window, do you know what you would be?
All we can go by is, I think, the way the house looked. There's very similar homes in the neighborhood that have some of the same features, and they have some of them wood features. So I think it will just one of those things. We'll probably get a couple of. We'd be interested in finding out contractors that are specialized more in the wood area, and see if we could bring it back to more of the original style. I don't know if there's any pictures. We haven't really researched it, but again, there's actually just homes in our neighborhood that we can probably go by
Even better than that, Google Street View history has become a very good friend of ours, so we may be able to get images that show you what they look like. We also have single photographs from the survey, and we know that the two front windows were single light picture windows.
Okay.
So, and I don't think we have any side shots, but we'll be able to help
Right.
you figure that out. So.
Okay. Okay. I think we could, do we need to ask anything about timing at this point in terms of, or?
You can either discuss that, and then if you wanted to reopen the public hearing
All
after
right.
you hear what your colleagues say, and check with the Zelinskys
Okay.
if that is appropriate for them.
So we'll close the public hearing now, and thank you for your application, and talk, and if we need to open up again to get more info from you, we will do that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, who wants to comment first?
Well, I'll go. I'd like to thank the Zelinskys for for nominating this to be on the Glendale Register. You know, Spar Heights, which is where this is located in northern Glendale, has very few homes that are actually on the Glendale Register, and of the 400 homes that are in Spar Heights, this is the only one like it. It just stands out when you walk. As you know, if you walk the neighborhoods, and like you said, it's very dog friendly. This isn't like anybody else's house. There's lots of Mediterranean revivals and some Tudor revivals, but there's only one stone house, and this pretty much is it. And it's to use the overused word that I use all the time, unique to the neighborhood. Other than the fact that it's got the vinyl windows, it's pretty much intact as to the way it's been since I've known it, and I've known it since 1981. So it's a very happy house, I can tell you that. It's had lots of kids over the years, and the pool has been used a lot. So I'm happy that the staff has recommended that it be on the Glendale Register. And when you look up the North Glendale Community Plan, this house is listed there on page 36 as with their 2010 stone house survey. So I'm more than happy to recommend that it be put on the Glendale Register. So.
You, Jen?
Yeah.
So I too would agree that that the house does deserve designation. It truly is a rare example of something that's still fairly intact. I also think it's interesting that I think, obviously stone was used, it was abundant, so it was a cost saving. It was a way to save on building costs. But I think also when, interesting to me, when the Brand Library was being restored, some of the construction, actually, I think of most, if not all of
The interior.
of that structure was found to be stone and mortar. So even Mr. Brand looked to ways to build using local materials. I think I'm going to guess we're all, the owners have already stated that you're willing to work on the windows. Should we talk about changes right now, or should we go through?
Yeah.
So I think, I'm not sure if the back door is something we want to consider. Christina, do you have a shot? I don't know what might have been more appropriate, or what period that door comes from. Also, I did notice that it looked like the pool area might have been recently fenced. I'm not sure when it was, but there's a low wall that sort of holds the railing, and maybe staff could work with the owners to find a more elegant way to finish that. It was kind of a rough transition.
And are you talking about the wall itself, or
The low wall that the iron, I think it's iron railing,
Right.
sits on. It appeared to me, I don't know if anyone else noticed it,
Yeah, I noticed
to be a little
this-
unfinished.
Yeah, the side that faces the driveway is pretty rough, and I don't know if it could be clad in stone or
I wouldn't
finish
recommend
some-
that. When we have one of the best intact stone houses, all the new cladding stones will never
Would
come
never,
close
yeah.
to the look.
or
But we
finish
could talk
somehow,
about
or
kind of a stucco parge or something over the wall to just smooth it out. If that is it an issue of the roughness and texture?
It just appears unfinished somehow. I don't know what the actual mixture or construction was,
Well,
but
we can recommend a condition, leaving it a little open, but the goal is to just kind of smooth out the face of that wall. Okay.
And then I just happened to notice, I'm going to guess it probably relates to maybe termite tenting on the south side of the house. There were a few broken tiles at the edge of the roof, so maybe just review the roof for any tiles that need to be repaired. And then I did appreciate, I've never really looked at stone construction closely. The owner shared how if you really pay attention to how the stones were laid out, you know, you get sort of your big boulders at the bottom, and then they get smaller as they move up towards the roof of the house. And I just think the lintels are terrific. Just such a nice feature. So, thank you for being such enthusiastic custodians of your home. Your love for the house is obvious, so thank you.
Yeah, I definitely concur with my colleagues, and thank you again for bringing this before us. Your excitement and passion for the house is great. I think it's always so amazing how houses find their perfect owners, and evident here as well. And yeah, it was really fun to see just the details of the stonework in the house, and from size of stone to placement to design. It's a really beautiful piece of art, really. And yeah, I concur with my colleagues of if you're willing to replace the windows, I think that would be great, and just bring this house back. My recommendation would be to give them adequate time. Costly project, and there's quite a few, so if maybe we give them between 3 and 5 years or something. The only other thing that I noticed that could maybe use a little redefining was there's a gutter or a chase on the very back wall of the house that looked a little clunky. I think maybe there's something a little more elegant could be done with that. I just remember noticing it. Maybe staff, you could just see if there's something to clean that up.
So it's on the rear wall?
Yeah, by the air conditioning unit, that vertical.
Oh, the downspout there?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, you know
Is
what
it-
that is? That's for the AC going up to the
Yeah.
blower in the attic.
So,
With the stone house, you know, and it is kind of gray already.
okay, well,
There's
maybe
not a
just
lot you can
look
do.
and see. But overall, yeah, I would definitely recommend this being added to the register.
And one option that we don't often use here, but Design Review Board does, is considerations, which is kind of a light condition, which ultimately the applicant can say no, and we don't do anything about it. But we could write a consideration to look to see if there are any options better than that.
That'd be fine.
Okay.
Fine with me.
Well, thank you so much for bringing us your house. You know, it's really a gift to see something this unique coming onto the register. I think it'll be the first stone house, or at least where the stone is visible. And when you mentioned what you just mentioned, I did think about the copper piping that's exposed at the Brand Library because of the stone and the, you know, the infrastructure can't be hidden, and I guess this is a similar situation. So, you know, it's just wonderful, and we'll look forward to, you know, I hope, a big, huge reception when you get your plaque,
yes.
where everybody in the world, no, I'm not,
Not
I'm
everybody.
just kidding. I mean, it's my fantasy, but
Party
I'm not-
condition, I like that.
I'm not, that has to be a new condition. No, I'm just kidding. But it's
Condition.
really wonderful, and I just will sweep all the comments my colleagues made into my comments and not repeat. But I just want to go over, because I also deeply appreciate your willingness to make the window change out. Because that's important, and it really brings the house into, you know, being perfectly intact material-wise. So the question becomes, you know, what's a reasonable amount of time to give you to do all this work? And then there was one thing I want to just go back to, and that was the back door, which I wasn't sure what we I have 3 items here, the pool wall being smoothed out and finished, the back door, and of course the windows. And I'm not sure what we decided on the back doors, so can we just focus on that for a minute?
Yeah, my house was built, it's 2 blocks over, and that door is almost exactly the same as, other than the doggy door, it's almost the exact same door that was on my house when I moved in 1981. And the people that had lived there before had that door since the house was built in 1930, so.
Really?
'Cause I'm guessing it may not be a Home Depot door, but it might be a Builder's Emporium door.
It could
There you
possibly have been.
No, I grew up with one of those, so. My house was
The
built
question
later.
is, the question is, do you want a more a panel door that's more period appropriate, or is this innocuous enough to live with? So I think.
I would prefer a panel door.
I would too.
Yeah.
Okay.
You think? So,
Yeah, and it can, I suppose we're not going to put restrictions on the doggy door portion, or are we?
no.
Just knock a hole in the wall.
An elegantly beveled, historical-looking.
Yeah, we can arrange for a panel door, period appropriate, that still has a window and
It has
space
to
for
have
the
a
dog
window,
door.
yeah.
So.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So at this point,
Can I ask a quick
Yeah, go ahead.
question? Do we need to consider, Jay, or is it sort of inherent to the property, since the Mills Act covers, everything, landscaping and all? Do we need to put any type of condition for perpetuity on other, like the stone walls around the house that hold up fencing or anything like that?
Yeah,
that
those
they
are
don't
part of the
kind of
part of the
get taken-
designation
okay.
and the Mills Act. Yeah.
Okay. Because I think sometimes for specific landscape features, we have to specify, but perhaps in
For
this case, we
planted
don't.
landscape features, not for hardscape
Okay.
features.
Okay, perfect.
I have one more question. I know we talked about the Benettis, and I tried to go out there on the internet and scope around, and I'm very bad at genealogical research, much better at structural things. But there is a Benetti stone company that's, I think it was formed in 2008. I'm not sure. But when I searched on Benetti, I did get Pio Benetti's biography. Some family member had done an extensive one out of the Mormon church, and it's like a long narrative. But I also found the Benetti Stone Company based in Italy and in England, and I wondered if anybody knew if it was the same family. I think Benetti is a pretty common Italian name, but the word Benetti stone and Benetti this and Benetti that for all these materials is out there, and it was just coincidental. But it just piqued my curiosity.
Plus, we have the Bonetto house not too far away.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Another name, similar name,
Also
but this
stone.
is Benetti.
Yeah.
So I went on their website, and it's a high-end stone masonry company. So I was just curious, but it doesn't sound like we know anything. So I would go along with the city's assessment there as well. And I assume we all agree that naming it the Benetti House will suffice for the time being, unless there's another discovery. So where do we go now? Should we take our vote?
Well,
or
generally, I
just-
read back the conditions to make
Okay.
sure you guys are cool with them. You should discuss the time frame for the other. What we've done in many cases is give a shorter time span for the easy things to fix, the longer term for the more expensive things that might even be phased. If you give enough time, hopefully we don't need to phase it where we'd have to monitor that. We just make sure it happens by the end date.
Okay.
Commissioner Shire mentioned 3 to 5 years. And you can either open up the public hearing or just have the applicant nod if you come up with a date that they are agreeable with.
Well, I think we're lumping everything together, I assume, and giving a time frame for the 3 things that were mentioned. So, and the windows obviously are the big ticket items. So
We could give 2 time frames. We could give a shorter time for the easy items and then the long time
Sure.
frame for the windows.
Okay.
We could do a year for the simple things and 3 years for the windows.
Okay. Would you like me to open the public hearing, or do you want to just nod from the audience? 1 year for the other 2 and 3 years for the windows.
Yeah,
4 years for the windows.
4 years
Does
for
that
the
I
seem
would go
fair?
with 4.
All right.
Okay.
So it appears that 1 year for the two items and 4 years to finish out the windows.
And then there was one item that we didn't capture that Commissioner Vartanian mentioned about checking for the cracked roof tiles,
Oh.
which we can just add, and if
Yeah.
it's a problem, it can be fixed. If it's
Right.
Not,
if it's not,
Probably individual tiles
Okay.
should be pretty
they were
straightforward.
around the edges.
I noticed specifically, excuse me, at the south, along the south border of the house,
Okay.
sort of in midway.
All right. So we have conditions to replace all vinyl windows with new wood windows, work with staff to determine what the historic grid pattern, if any, was, operation type as well, with a 4-year time limit for that, which will end December 31st, 2020. Whoa. Freaky. And then for all of the other conditions, we'll have a 1-year time limit, December 31st, 2017. Those will include replacing the back door with a new paneled door that will maintain the ability to have a window and a dog door in it. To smooth out the face of the wall separating the lower backyard area from the upper pool deck in a manner that smooths out the texture and finish of that low wall. We'll have a condition to check the roof tiles, especially along the south facade, to verify if there are any tiles that need replacement. If there are, to replace those tiles. And a consideration to look more closely at the chase for the HVAC lines and power line probably, and see if there's a more appropriate way to do that, or perhaps even just refinish it in a way that would blend in better with the wall. And that's everything.
okay, so do I have a motion to, for the landmark and for the Mills Act with conditions as stated.
Yeah, I'll do it. I recommend that the Historic Preservation Commission recommend to the City Council that the property at 3620 Angeles Avenue, to be called the Benetti House, be designated as a historic resource in the Glendale Register with Historic Resources based on the findings identified in the staff determination. We also recommend the City Council authorize the city manager to enter into a Mills Act contract with the property owners for the property tax savings, with the conditions so listed by Mr. Platt earlier.
Second. Oh, sorry. Are you
No, that
done?
would be it, yeah.
I second.
Okay, roll call. Commissioner Shire,
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian,
Yes.
Chair Vidor.
Yes,
Passes 4-0.
thank
Congratulations.
you very much. We have two more stops, right? Or one more stop, City Council.
Yes, City Council. Yes, this is a recommendation.
This is our recommendation to them, so thank you. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is 1450 Royal Boulevard. So, Christina.
Next up, we have a property of a very different provenance. 1450 Royal Boulevard is a 1- and 2-story Spanish colonial revival house built in 1931 and located in the Greenbrier neighborhood. It's also a contributing structure to the Royal Boulevard Historic District and was featured in the Glendale Historical Society's 2007 Home Tour. So construction and financing was done by the National Thrift Corporation, which filed for bankruptcy before the house was completed. It then passed over to a local real estate syndicate before Wallace and Anna Tupper, the first owners of the house, purchased it in 1932. So Wallace Tupper was a member of a prominent Glendale family that established roots here in 1912. His father appears to have been a local real estate developer, and his sister, Agnes, married Dan Campbell Jr., whom you know is of another prominent Glendale family. So the Tupper family resided here for many years, and I believe close to 50. And Anna Tupper passed away in 1982, and yeah, the house belonged to the family until then. So the house is L-shaped in plan and clad with white white textured stucco. The roofs are red clay tile and consist of an array of hipped, gabled, and shed configurations with a slight eave overhang. Possibly the most distinctive character-defining feature at the front facade is the squared entry tower, which rises 2 stories and features an octagonal roof, a cupola, and battered stucco walls. A series of tiled steps leads to an arched, recessed, wood-paneled entry door, and immediately west of the entry tower is a projecting balcony supported by wood posts and corbels, which you can sort of see in this photo. So all the windows at the front facade are deeply recessed that help give the house a look of heavy masonry. These include a single steel divided light window at the entry tower, which is edged with hand-painted tile, and also a stained glass rose window, and this paired casement steel divided light window that's covered with a very ornate iron grille. Most of the fenestration at the rest of the house are flush, just simple paired and single casement windows. Facing Moreno Drive is a large courtyard enclosed by a low stucco wall. It features a beehive fireplace and wrought iron light fixtures, which we believe are original. Also has sets of French doors and a stucco chimney capped with brick and a crosshatch design. The side facade features a small inset balcony at the second floor and a gated portal with a clay tile roof that leads to the backyard and connects to the 2-story detached garage and guest house. So this is the view of the garage from the street. It's 2 stories, features 3 paneled wood doors and a row of windows up at the top. At the rear is a staircase with a wrought iron rail that leads to an entrance at the 2nd story. And one thing I wanted to mention, and I think we talked about it with some of the commissioners, the backyard was re-landscaped and a swimming pool was added in 2015. So it's a very contemporary design, and if you want to talk about it during the conditions phase of the discussion, we may. So the application has suggested that the house may be significant for its association with the Tupper family. I happened to just find this postcard that had a little sign that says Tupper Real Estate Insurance, I think. It's difficult to tell. So clearly, I think the Tupper family was prominent, and probably some of the members did play a significant role in the development of the city. However, it wasn't, the nomination did not establish the specific roles of Wallace or Anna Tupper in this, and so staff believes the house is probably not significant under Criterion 2. However, we did believe that due to embodying the character-defining features of the Spanish colonial revival style and its overall high integrity, that the house is significant under Criterion 3. And I don't know if there's a public comment or if we want to move on to discussion.
So, any questions for Christina before we go to the public hearing?
A slight historical correction, which has nothing to do with the house itself. On the Tuppers, the Tuppers owned a garage in Glendale, according to the 1917 and 1921 directories. They weren't the first Ford automobile dealership in Glendale. That went to Jesse Smith, which opened in 1916. So Jesse Smith was there from 1916 until they closed in 1975. But the Tuppers, if you want to know, they lived at, in the 1921 directory, their garage, this was the Tuppers, were at 114 North Glendale Avenue. And they had 2 kids, and they lived at 1401 California. But in the 1917 directory, they were at, let's see, where are they at? The Tupper's were at 401 East 2nd Street. What 2nd Street at the time was, is now California. So they lived in Glendale itself before they moved up to Royal Boulevard. Other than that, they were prominent in Glendale as far as being having one of the major garages from 1917 on, but I don't know if that would apply for criteria too, just owning a garage. But they weren't the Ford dealership in Glendale at the time. I'm done.
Watch out, Jim
For
Berger.
that.
Uh-oh. Okay. Well, Roxanne Odom is here, the owner of the home, so come on out. Come on down, Roxanne.
So, I'm Roxanne Odom, one of the owners, along with my husband, Ron. We have lived at this beautiful home. We moved in 2 weeks before my second son was born. It was one of these houses, when we were looking at homes at the time in Glendale, we lived at another house that we would drive by and say, if ever that home went on the market, we would want to buy that house. And it did, actually, at a time when we couldn't afford it. Then we had a friend of mine actually moved on the street, and subsequently, I don't know, several years later, told us that it went on the market, or it was going to be on the market. So my husband wrote a note to the then owner's doctor and his wife, and he passed along to the realtor, and we said we wanted to buy your home. And we did. Before we even saw it, we knew we wanted to buy it. We love it. We've been fortunate to have communication with the son of the original owner. He actually drove by one time when my husband and two boys were playing out in front. He told my husband a story of sleeping out on the balconies when it was hot. And he would take, which I thought my husband said was a BB gun, but he said no, it was a .22, and hunt from the balcony.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I've had extensive communication with the granddaughter of the original owner, who remembers vivid details of the house. I had a bunch of email communication with her. She lives in Hong Kong now. And we love the home. It's pretty intact as far as we can tell. We haven't done much to it. I mean, the big project was the backyard. It was terraced before, and we're happy we put the pool in. We use it all the time now. And I don't know if there's anything else there, if anybody has any questions. And thank you for coming out and taking a look.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll now we'll make our comments and also address any Mills Act considerations. So,
Let's start.
okay.
Well, first of all, thank you again for bringing this before us for consideration. You have a beautiful house architecturally. My favorite aspect of the Spanish colonial style is truly how there is balance in asymmetry. And if you look at the front facade, it's gorgeous with the tower and the two-story to the left and the single-story or one-and-a-half-story to the right. And there's some beautiful features, from the tile work on the front to ironwork. It's beautiful. I really enjoyed touring it. And I think the features of the house from the front and even the side courtyard are really in keeping with the style. What presents challenges for me in this consideration is the pool and backyard modification. I feel like the architectural style, the integrity of the architectural style diminishes as you work your way from the front to the backyard. And if we're looking at the property holistically, it's disappointing to me to have to consider maybe not being as passionate and exciting about putting this on the register, because I feel like it's could have been done so much better. I feel it's a lot of concrete, hardscape, sharp edges, squared corners, too contemporary for the building. And I think what Spanish architecture does so well is that indoor-outdoor play of inside outdoor spaces, courtyards, gardens, and I think the backyard could have had a lot more, whether it was terraced because it's on a hill, is completely appropriate, but done with DG or pebbles and landscaping, planters up against the house or in different areas, that would have really softened the facade. I think it's just quite stark. And if I have to consider, is this, one of the best exemplary examples of Spanish colonial in Glendale, and if I have to look at it from property line to property line, I have a hard time doing that. And it pains me because it's beautiful from the front, from the courtyard, even with that little beehive fireplace. So that's my challenge with it today.
Who's next?
I can go.
Well, I concur with what my Commissioner Shire said. The house itself it's almost exactly the way it was when it was built in '31. I mean, it's great running around the property. I happen to have lived literally catty-cornered into this house for 25 years, so I saw it a lot. Yeah, exactly what Commissioner Shire had said. The considering the totality of everything, the pool it's fine and nice, but when we're considering the Mills Act, it's everything has to flow together, and that's the one thing that is so 2015. It's not like something that would have worked with a house when it was built in 1931. So I don't know if I'm just kind of on the fence of this. I would just like to hear all the other commissioners talk about it before I make a decision on it. We want to have houses that represent the best, and this house represents the best, but the totality of it all is a little iffy for me.
So I would have to concur that I too am conflicted about the backyard renovation. I do want to start by saying that I think we all recognize that the house itself is fabulous and worthy and just beautiful to look at. I also want to say that I really enjoyed reading your correspondence with the granddaughter that was part of our packet. I really got lost in time for a few pages, and your love for the house is evident. And you talk about how you had been driving past it, and you guys really wanted this house. But as was mentioned, for a Mills Act contract and designation, we really do look at a home 360 degrees. And so, I think, let's see, I just have a few notes that I want a reference to. So there, Mr. Gregory prepared a report in 1996 that was also part of our packet that notes, not speaking to any specific part of the property, that the current landscaping scheme is in keeping with the period. The vegetation does not hide or overwhelm the house, but is a pleasing mixture of fruit trees, succulents, and palm. I'm going to guess, and I don't know, we have the benefit of Mr. Gregory being here. I don't know if we might, if my commissioners are interested, if he has a recollection of what the backyard looked like. But that said, I too probably would have liked to see some more natural elements. I think what we're seeing is not, and I don't think this much hardscape would have been imagined when the house was built. In fact, we are going to be looking at a property next that also had a pool. Christina, would you be able to put up a slide of the next property we're going to look at? That property, and of course we haven't made any decisions on that property yet, but that property also has a contemporary poolscape that was put in, I think in 1991, if I'm not mistaken. But again, this is something more in the lines of what I personally would envision for a home of this vintage, using more, sort of natural stones, maybe having some grass and some stepping stones and more plantings, more greenery, just a more sense of nature. And I do, I think it was interesting that the son mentioned that he would hunt from the balcony. I mean, that gives us a sense of how rural the area was at the time. So, so I think I will stop my comments for the moment and let Chair Fedor make her comments.
Okay.
Where we're going to go.
Yeah, I think this house is, yes, it's a Spanish colonial revival house, but it is extraordinarily unique in its architecture. The rectangular tower, the octagonal tile roof, the multi-levels being divided the way that they are divided. You know, this is very strong asymmetry, and yet it's so incredibly balanced that its uniqueness just about almost overrides any other considerations. However, I guess I have a question for everybody on the panel here and for Jay Platt also, in that are we saying a pool addition is a non-starter, or are we saying that the pool has to blend architecturally with the architecture of the home for it to be acceptable? I guess I'm not sure whether we're objecting to the pool in and of itself or the style of the pool here. Because on one hand, we always say we need to differentiate new additions to historic homes, and on the other hand, we're saying we want this addition to look like the home. So where's the middle ground? I need a little bit more elaboration on what the ideal is here. If we're saying there's an issue with the pool and the way it's designed, what are we envisioning that would be acceptable? And then we can talk about the Mills Act and how that might help to bring us where we need to be.
So I would say that I don't think we're talking about the pool itself. I think the pool is one component of the, sorry, Christina, could you pop up the backyard slide again? I think the pool and the little spa area is just one component of the entire redo of the backyard, right? And yes, I think we do talk about differentiation, but I think we also have degrees of differentiation. I think, for example, the pool in the other slide we looked at, I don't think anybody would confuse that pool for being of 1931 vintage, but it tends to blend in a little better or sync a little better with what we might expect of a property from that period, right? I think overall it's a lot of concrete. And I know sometimes when we're talking about differentiation, we also run into the issue of sometimes where things are being restored so closely to the original that we say, well, we have to make it look, it can't be exact, we have to make it look a little different. And so someone from the consulting group, Historic Resources Group, which is used a lot in the city of Glendale and are very well respected, once said to me that one of their criteria was that they use sort of the 6 foot, I don't remember if it was the 6 foot rule or the 9 foot rule, so that from a distance you shouldn't really be able to distinguish, but once you get up within, you know, a 6 or a 9 foot distance, that you'd be able to distinguish or differentiate.
In preservation philosophy, that's one person's concept. There are so many different ways to handle changes that we shouldn't limit ourselves, but it's an interesting one. So.
No, and again, it might just be that consulting group's philosophy, and I will, you know, they are used quite frequently in the city of Glendale. So, and again, yes, in preservation we know there are all different philosophies.
Even for those guys, looking at their projects overall. So.
Yeah. So again, I think for me, and I think at some level the fact that it happened, I mean, I don't know, Jay, if this came before staff for any recommendations, but the fact that it was done prior to designation and maybe without any input in terms of what might be appropriate.
Yeah, this would have come to us in 2015 as an alteration to a contributing structure in the district. Because it's completely invisible from the street, they could have done anything, much more dramatic than this if they had chosen. Obviously, it's different once you're on the register with the Mills Act.
So that if they had come in saying, you know, we really would like to think about being listed and engaging in a Mills Act contract, it might have been approached slightly differently than just being within a historic district in terms of recommendations.
Yeah, and you know, if we think about almost every house that we've looked at that has a swimming pool, the pool's not original. Going back to the period when there were early in-ground pools, they tended to be more rectangular than freeform, so this is actually in shape at least, but obviously in the raised quality and the seating wall around it. The terracing at the back looks like it's an early feature for the house. In the aerial view before this was done, we see those terraces were there, so that isn't an issue. As you keep focusing on the kind of the amount of concrete there, not only are you the body in the city that judges whether something's historically appropriate or not, but you're also the design review body for these historic properties. So if you wanted to deviate from what's exactly historically appropriate and say there's too much concrete and let's try to find a way to soften this with removing concrete, creating planting beds, putting drought-tolerant landscape that works with the Spanish style. That would be one alternative. You could look at the tile and say this tile really isn't working in its pattern or its appearance, where you could make some significant changes here as a Mills Act condition without, you know, saying start over with the pool and all that. So I think you have a number of options if you're interested in designating the house to kind of mitigate things through the Mills Act.
Well, I would want to be respectful to the owner. I wouldn't assume or project on them that the backyard needs to be redone. They've just done it, right? And they've chosen it the way they want it, and they want to live in it that way.
Sure.
And, I mean, I respect that. The benefit we have in this situation is it's in a historic district. It's a contributing structure. It's under purview from the street, which is in perfect condition and intact and historically, you know, a valuable resource, and nothing will change that. It's got protection over it. So I think my approach would be, it's a beautiful property and structure, but if it doesn't rise to the level currently, because if I flip quickly from the slides of front yard to backyard, I would say those are completely different properties. And but again, I wouldn't put on the owner any dramatic changes. They've done this construction how they want to live, and that's completely appropriate. So for me, I think at this point I would just say I would recommend not putting it on the register. Respectful to that's their choice, and they've got a beautiful property and they can enjoy it how they would, you know, so choose and how they've designed it.
Well, I see your point, see everybody's point, but I think it would be good before we go down that road to hear from the owner. I know this may not be what the owner was expecting, but I think if we're going to say and I don't know what the vote is right now, so I'm not I'm not precasting the vote. I'm just saying that if we do go down the road of rejecting a landmark application because things could be done and we're going to assume that they wouldn't want to do anything, I would like to open the public hearing again and hear from Roxanne Odom and let her talk about what, if the family is really interested in pursuing landmark status, what they would be willing to do now that you've heard what the concerns are. So can I open the public hearing again and have Roxanne comment?
Of course.
Okay.
Should I come up?
Yes, please do.
First off,
Tell us who you are again.
You say
Roxanne Odom.
Yeah.
First off, we're not done with the backyard, and we do hate all the concrete because it is too much concrete. There is going to be more planting back there, and had we known that we would have needed to come and get approvals because of the status of the house, we would have done so, but I didn't know that. We do want to do more and absolutely open to suggestions on what to do to make it more in tune with the house, because we would like to have the historic designation of our home. We love it. I mean, and we use the pool all the time now. The kids absolutely love it. But if there are modifications that need to be made, I think we would be open to listening to what you had to say.
Thank you very
I mean,
much.
the more plantings. There were no fruit trees, by the way, when we moved in. There were a bunch of rose bushes in the backyard. And there's one olive tree on the side that's been there for a long, long time on the vegetation
It's still
front.
there.
Yeah, and it's still there.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Well, having heard that, I think we may want to give that consideration. If we don't know at this point. It's a complicated project and activity to rework your backyard to meet the requirements, and I'm not sure whether we develop a game plan for you right here. That might be way too complicated, or whether we bring you back. So I'd like to get some advice from Mr. Platt on how we would proceed if the owners are willing to consider bringing the backyard reconfiguration into a Mills Act contract, because that's a big undertaking, but if the owners are willing to do that, I don't think we should reject it out of hand. Does anybody have any reaction to that?
Well, I agree with your sentiment. I mean, I find...
Did she answer your first question?
Oh,
Yep, well, basically, with design review, we have two things. We have the designation, then the design review component.
Right.
You're considering whether or not to designate based on some design issues. So the way the design review board works is we can approve with conditions, as we did the Mills Act for the last property. If you were concerned, and then the board then gives staff direction, reduce the massing of the second floor, create an additional setback, move a bedroom downstairs, lots of different options there. In this case, if you were comfortable coming up with a set kind of list of recommendations, we would implement those if you wanted to entrust that to staff. The other option that DRB has is a return for redesign, which means the project comes back to the board for review. That wouldn't be appropriate here because this is a hearing, but what you could do is continue the hearing. You're allowed to continue any hearing if you request additional information from an applicant that isn't here. That would give the Odom family an opportunity to work with the designer to produce a scheme that staff could work with them to try to find a balance that allowed them to keep a pool, but maybe create a landscape that's more in keeping with the house. And then we would reschedule the hearing and bring it back to you, and you'd review that new plan and see if that changes your view. So that's definitely an option.
I like the last option.
yeah, I do too, and I kind of feel your pain because I know how enthusiastic you are about your house, and we all are too. But I think it would be best. We can't work this up here, and I think it would be best for you for us to. Whatever we do, we're not going to disapprove it. We're going to send it back for reconsideration.
You're going to continue the hearing to a date
hearing.
uncertain, because we don't know when we'll receive the.
Right.
When we do it to a date uncertain, that means we publicly notice it again. So
All right, so we don't want to reject the application out of hand, but it sounds like the best option is going to be to continue the hearing and have you come back now that you know what the issue is with a plan to, make it more historically integral, soften it up with landscaping, reduce the amount of concrete, and look at the materials and the angles of things to try to pay a little bit more homage to the house's architecture. So, what kind of a motion is that? Let's see.
It'd be a motion to continue the hearing to a date uncertain.
Okay, so
With the goal of reviewing landscape
Okay.
materials for the rear yard.
so who wants to do the honors
I'll
of
make
the
a motion.
motion? Thank you.
I'd like to move to continue this issue, 1450 Royal Boulevard, register nomination and Mills Act application to a date uncertain, with some redesign issues for the backyard that would be more in keeping with the Spanish colonial architecture and style of the home from the front facade, and making the property as a whole more holistic and retaining the high level of Spanish colonial integrity of the house throughout the entire property. That would involve pool, hardscape, landscape, finishes, materials.
Quite a
etc.
condition.
Second?
I'll second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Votanian?
Yes.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Chair Vidor?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. And we'll bring this back, and then the applicant will work with staff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your flexibility, and it does not reflect on your enthusiasm for the house at all. We know you're very enthusiastic. Thank
And
you.
your taste. And we know it's a beautiful house. And there were pictures all over my presentation of your house. And oh, you were there. Okay. Anyway, thank you. Okay, so we will now go to the final house, 571 Cumberland.
And just so the audience knows, if you're enjoying this, please stay, but you don't have to stay. So,
No.
at DRB
The
hearings,
audience.
people are out the second they're done. So,
It's better than HBO, isn't it? Come on. Okay. Go ahead, Christina.
All right. The third and final Glendale Register nomination of the evening is 571 Cumberland Road. It's a French Revival-style residence located in the Brockmont neighborhood. It was built in 1926 by a contractor named Clifton Chester Swift. No architect, unfortunately, is listed on the original permits. The first owners of the property were Edward and Harriet Philippi, a couple who was originally from Ohio. Edward was an optometrist who had his own practice in Glendale. They lived in the home until 1943, when it was sold to radio, television, and film personality Art Baker, who would reside at the house with his family until 1946. So Art Baker was a sort of early triple threat. He had a very active career spanning almost 4 decades. He was born Arthur Schenck in 1898 in the Bowery neighborhood of Manhattan. He was a traveling evangelist for a number of years before settling in Glendale with his family in the 1930s. So what seems to be his first job in Glendale, or an early job, was as a lecturer and tour guide at Forest Lawn. And in 1936, he was recruited to be the announcer of Forest Lawn's new radio show called Tapestries of Life. This seems to have been a turning point for him. It really launched his career, and he quickly found this niche in the radio world, first as an announcer for Amy Semple McPherson's station KSFG, and then later as an interviewer, an on-air interviewer for a number of radio shows. And it was around this time that he adopted the name Art Baker. I think he tried out Bob Baker for a while as part of another show, I think Hollywood on Parade. But anyway, Art Baker stuck. And he went on to appear in several major motion pictures, including Hitchcock's Spellbound. All the while, he maintained a steady presence on the radio with the show Art Baker's Notebook, which began airing on KFI in 1938 and was on the waves for about 20 years. What makes Baker interesting was his ties to Glendale. He was the narrator of a documentary called Glendale on Parade, which came out in 1939. It was produced by the city. It showcased Glendale's buildings and civic achievements and just day-to-day life, and it's kind of become like a local classic. Baker also made appearances at Hoover High, where his daughter Diane was a student, and it's notable that he was living at this property, 571 Cumberland, during some of his most active years. So that said, the house has undergone some very significant alterations, most notably in 1991 with the addition of a large detached garage and sun deck structure at the front elevation. So these are photos of the house prior to the addition. and the house as it appears today. Okay, so talk a little bit about the architecture. 571 Cumberland is L-shaped in plan with asymmetrical massing comprised of gabled, hipped, and shed-roofed volumes. The roofs are steeply pitched with narrow eaves and clad with composition shingle. The walls are clad with smooth stucco, and fenestration throughout the house consists mostly of single paired and tripartite divided light wood windows. The front setback features a manicured lawn and a U-shaped driveway, and a front terrace with some shrubbery that's enclosed by a low brick retaining wall and a wrought iron fence. The brick stairs lead to a circular entry tower, which features a castellated parapet, recessed casement windows, and a non-original wood door. And just to the west of this tower is a large conical roofed bay with divided light casement windows and prominent lintels. I'll add here that most or many of the windows are replacement materials, and some of them are compatible with the house and others are not. A front-facing gable with a swooping flared roofline is a prominent and character-defining feature of the house. A set of French doors opens out to the sun deck, which is formed by the roof of the garage. Based on earlier photos, it appears that these French doors replaced what was once a large tripartite window. Other alterations that are visible in these photos include a large shed roof dormer and also the enclosure of a side porch on the ground floor. This is the aforementioned garage and the sun deck. At the northeast end of the house is another large addition, which is with a steeply pitched shed roof that was built above the gabled volume. It's nice that they sort of differentiated from the original volume. You can see where it was originally and where the addition is very clearly. There's also a circular staircase with a wrought iron railing and a little balconette. A large fan-shaped window at the apex of the gable may or may not be original. My guess is not, because it just seems very large to be up so high. These are some views of the backyard. We saw some of these photos earlier in the presentation. The detached garage was converted into a guest house that sort of matches the appearance of the main dwelling, with the fan-shaped window and the French doors and divided light casements. And this was provided by the current owners. It's a building footprint circa the 1950s. It's difficult to see exactly what's going on, but you do get a sense of what the scale was before the addition. And this is the proposal for the new garage and the landscaping from 1991, where the garage sort of dominates the front, and we can discuss that in a bit here. So because of the degree of alterations to this house, it makes it a little bit tricky for discussion. Staff is recommending designation based on its association with Art Baker, whose contributions to film, radio, and television are pretty remarkable and more significant because of his ties to Glendale. Unfortunately, based on the architecture alone, we would have to recommend denial, but we can talk about it further. And if there's if the owners are present, and if we'd like public discussion.
Does anyone have a question for Christina Park? Open the public hearing? Okay.
Not at this time.
No. Okay, so the first speaker will be Tim Gregory again.
Well, I think the house is a good example of French revival style, and it's kind of rare in period revival styles, with its steeply pitched roof and castellated entry tower and the conical bay window in the center, and the wooden casement windows and French doors are very compatible with French revival. But as the staff mentioned, between 91 and 96, there was quite significant additions to the easterly part of the house, even though I think they were in keeping with the style. And they did, as we had mentioned earlier, how important it was to differentiate between the new and the old. And even before I knew the history of the house, when I drove by it, I could tell what had been added and what was original. And I think the architect probably did a pretty good job with the addition. But I think the significance of the house really rests in Mr. Baker's residency there. He was originally known as Arthur Shank, and it was a while before I made the connection between Arthur Shank and Art Baker. And I'm probably the only person in the room who remembers watching Art Baker, and you asked for it on TV.
No, I
Did you?
remember.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I think it was on Sunday afternoons or something. We'd gather and watch him. It was one of the first reality shows, actually, because he'd go out or he'd send his crew out to find people, unusual people doing unusual things. And it was always very captivating. He's a very debonair fellow with his white hair and black eyebrows. I thought he was a distinguished-looking guy. I want to commend the owner for digging so deeply into the biography of Art Baker. I was amazed at what he found. Even a family member, one of our special guests today, so I'll let him take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so our next speaker is Phil and Jackie Kubel.
Try to make it entertaining.
I'm sure you will, since you're a filmmaker.
My name is Phil Kubel, and this is my wife Jackie, and we're the owners of 571 Cumberland. And first off, we just want to thank the commission for this opportunity. When we purchased the house, we never even imagined going through this process, and we never imagined we'd be here today. We just knew we loved the house and our passion for it, and when we had Mr. Gregory do the initial report, and then there was that small little thing in there, because originally we wanted it, we thought it would be eligible for its architectural purpose. We know there's not a lot of French-style homes on the register, and we thought that this would be a good opportunity, and we thought we were going right after that, and that was 100% our entirety. And then, there was a little blip on there, this person named Arthur Shank that was a producer, and we all started diving a little deeper, and we found out that, in the time Arthur Shank was actually Art Baker and had different aliases, and going back so far, those aliases were very covered up, and it took a lot of digging and diving and going to the Paley Center and finding all the people. And so I just want to, again, thank you guys for this opportunity, especially Mr. Platt and Ms. Park, for the tons of emails that we sent you, and we could probably spend hours and hours in talking about Art Baker, because every day we seem to be discovering something new, and his contribution not only to Glendale but to the nation and to the world, and things that he did. And because of my background in entertainment, I have a newfound love and glory and passion for what he provided in the house that we are living in. And I want to thank his granddaughter, Karen Sidney, who's here today, Art Baker's, and connecting us, excuse me, with her and Diane. And I don't know if you guys had a chance to see the video, but Diane came and toured the house, and Diane was Art Baker's daughter, and she came not so long ago and toured the house. And I know one of the conditions that is talked about is, would Art Baker recognize the house today if he was in it? Well, his daughter was there, and she lived in the house, and she instantly remembered all the things and gave us a whole video tour of the house and what she remembered. And she definitely knew there's definitely some additions, and we didn't do the additions, so we take no offense to those additions, but we do believe that the previous owners were sensitive. They were very meticulous, and they were very proud of the house as well, and they lived in it for quite some time. And again, I think we shared it with you guys when you guys toured the house, that we are very, very passionate about the house and preserving it, and are open to any suggestions to make sure it's restored and it's maintained to the condition that Art Baker would have wanted it to be in, and we're just proud to be part of the process. And I don't know if you get to see the video, but where we have Diane tour the house. It's a quick little 3-minute video, and it was just really neat to see someone, come back to a home 70 years later and see it, and that just, for your hearts and historical purposes meant a lot to us. So again, I just wanted to really thank you guys.
And addressing the commission, I do have the videos ready to roll. If you're interested in
We're going to
seeing
ask
them.
if we get to see the video.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, you have 4 videos. Is there one that's
There was
most
one
representative?
called I think I was able to show you guys the videos when you guys saw the house of, talking about Nat King Cole performing in the house and things like that. And those are just little cherry on the top things for us, and I know they don't really influence it. But Diane being able to come back and her memory of the house, I know, was something that you guys wanted. Were concerned about, and we were able to capture just a little bit. She was there for a little over an hour, and this was just a quick little 3-minute snippet of her walking through the house that we wanted to put together for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we could see more if the commission wants.
Thank
but
you.
Yeah, let's look at this one.
Oh, we do this here. I'm not sure.
Sound usually just works.
Volume up.
Sound usually works. Oh, you know something? They messed everything up. If we take a quick pause, we had some speakers that were attached. And they're under here.
We brought the video on an iPad too, just in case. We have backup plans.
Okay, we haven't used these for a while. Let's try it again.
Yeah, we don't usually get presentations.
No.
So when you and Jackie came to the house and we were going through pictures, it was amazing how much Mom remembered about the house and the exact floor plan of this room was there, and then I walked in and there was the piano, and then this was over here, and this was the balcony where I used to look out. And it was so fun for her because she has such fond memories of the house, being there with her mom and dad and her sister. And it's just been a topic of discussion since then. It's brought back so many good memories of being in this house. And so coming to the house, so much of it is the same. 70 years later, it's fabulous.
It's been a long time, many, many years. God, this is a fun thing. Well, see, that little back room was an office, kind of. And there was a big grand piano right there in front of the fireplace. And that's where Nat King Cole was. This was his office, yeah. There was a desk, but there were all kinds of files and things, I think, up there. And I remember being down and being able to see the balcony. And so somebody would come out and we'd say, "Hi, how are you?" And it was a very friendly spot. "Hi, everybody." Yoo-hoo.
So you remember this?
I remember my sister and I used to have more fun. Who is that down there? I remember the patio there. And what did my dad and I used to do up there? Collected rocks or something. And that's the garage. It was just small. Gosh, this is so pretty. The one thing I do remember is that when you came in the door and you opened that up, it went down to the basement. And that's where we had the ping pong table and all that stuff. So what a pretty view. Oh my gosh. Now that's interesting.
So that would have been the driveway, correct?
Yes. The driveway would come right straight up and then turn, and then the garage was there. And there was like a small bedroom.
Yeah, right.
That's where I was for a while. Yeah, it was small and just I was right there. Well, I can remember archways. I don't remember that they're all the same, but I can remember that there were archways in here. And it's just part of the house. That's the way it was.
So if you come over here and look at this part of the house, does this bring back memories?
Yes.
What were your thoughts when you pulled up?
Oh, yeah. I just said, wow. I said, wow, that's great. It'll probably bring back a whole lot of memories on the way home. Well, I remember when we had something sparks it. Yeah, we had a lot of different parties and a lot of different get-togethers. It was great. Fun place.
Cool.
Very nice.
Just a little
Thank you.
snippet.
Thank you very much. That was a nice treat.
Made with people.
So, Jackie, did you have anything to add? Or?
No, I think someone said earlier that somehow a house finds the owner it's meant to have. And I think that we're a pretty good example of that with what my husband does, with what Mr. Baker created. I feel like Phil has really brought a man back to life, so who may have just kind of gone into history with his accomplishments, but to connect with his family the way that we have, I feel like they've become our family now, and to kind of have these conversations and know the history of our home makes it that much more special. So I think that he really is quite the cyber stalker and really was able to find...
It's a public hearing, don't say that.
so much in a positive way of what he was able to find really just is meaningful.
What's your next documentary topic?
Yeah, I think it's an Art Baker documentary in your future.
And in fact, his granddaughter just drove back from Santa Barbara. Later on in Mr. Baker's life, his last wife was Jerry Larson, and she was considered one of the top ladies of magic, and her sons, Milt Larson, was the co-founder of the Magic Castle, and she went down to go talk to Milt, because Milt created the Variety Art Center in downtown, which was a museum dedicated to people like Art Baker, and she literally came back from Santa Barbara trying to get some more information of learning more about her grandparents or her granddad, and so we're constantly uncovering stuff and learning more about the history of who Art Baker was. So it's without him, I don't think we would. I might not have my position in my career, and you wouldn't have shows like the TMZs and the Price is Right, and these late night talk shows.
Don't say that.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but he definitely paved the road
I think
for a lot of this
if
stuff.
he were alive and he came up to the house, he was the spokesperson for Chevrolet. He'd probably really like the garages. Cars that might have really worked for him.
Yeah.
But
the garage, he might have needed more for his cars. Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you very much, and if we need to reopen the public hearing in a while, we will, but for now, we're just going to take comments from the commissioners and see where we're at. So,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Oh, yes. Would you like to come up and speak, since you're here? You would have to fill out a card, which you could do easily, and we could have you come up and say something. Yeah, great. Thank you.
You can do it afterwards.
You can do that afterwards. You can do that afterwards. We'll just say your name, and then you can.
My name is Karen Sidney, and Art Baker was my grandfather. I'll be brief because I didn't really plan to speak, but I would just like to say my grandfather passed away when I was 9. So a lot of what I learned about my grandfather was what I could listen to and pictures that we've seen. And as a 9-year-old, I don't think you think too much about family history, but all of a sudden being contacted by Phil and learning about the home, it's just got us to go through the house and boxes of things. We have all of every one of his audio tape reels from his radio show, The Notebook. So there's so much stuff that you didn't really know that you had. So I'm grateful for Phil and Jackie kind of opening this up, because it's just amazing in your own family what you don't know. So, and his passion to kind of research art and keep his spirit and legend alive has been awesome. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess I have a question which I should have asked when you were up there, but you mentioned the Paley Center, and is there a repository of information on Art Baker in this
If you just come up for the speaker.
You would like to come back up.
There is a clip, if you'd like to see. We have a brief clip of a gentleman who's a historian from the Paley Center. It's about a 2-minute clip on there, and he came and actually talked for hours. We ran out of tape, and he would keep on going. But he was a gentleman who works for the
established criteria too.
Yeah, I think it might be worth the 2 minutes to see that.
It's approximately a 2-minute
We can't
clip.
do the hour thing.
Yeah, no, but he talks. He really goes into detail about, especially his significance.
He was in Southern California and also on the national level, but I think also because he was such a fixture in Southern California radio for well over a quarter century. I mean, I think that really speaks a lot to that type of, as I said, that type of soothing voice, that reassuring voice, and that omnipresence that radio really gave to him. I mean, he was on once a week, to be sure, for you asked for it, But again, he was so omnipresent on radio. You could find him on KFI. You could find him on, at WGN in Chicago. You could find him over at WBZ in Boston. Virtually any major market had heard Art Baker's voice over the years.
And there's one other quick where he, if you want to see it, where he reunites the original Our Gang cast, which was kind of a staple moment in one of his shows. It was called the Our Gang clip.
One thing Art Baker loved was reunion shows. He loved reunion shows, and this was actually 2 years before This Is Your Life. And he loved to show and one of the first things that endeared himself was also to reunite the original Our Gang from the silent days. And it actually was probably the last time that they had all gotten together since their last time of working together on the Hal Roach lot at that point. And it went over tremendously.
That is how they looked 25 years ago, my friend. Here is how they look today.
And he would do the same with someone who said, I appeared in a bit role in a film, and I have not seen it since 1924. Could you please find this film and show it to me? Because I would also love to show my family. And there was no records at that point, but he was able to do through good creative digging and nose to the grindstone, was able to uncover this man's appearance and a bit role in this film and show it on television. He would have people like Buster Keaton on. He would have he actually had Bela Lugosi on, which actually was a veiled plug for an upcoming pilot that never was realized called Dr. Acula.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so who would like to comment first?
Well, I think just for the criteria 2, I think Art Baker satisfies all the needs that you have for that, and I agree with staff. So I have no problem with that part of it. The other part, criteria 3 or the Mills Act. So.
I'll say a few things. First of all, thank you for bringing this before us once again, and just your passion and time and effort and research. It's been amazing. We have very few that come before us under this criteria with so much history and work product and all of that. So it's kind of fun for us. We're less experienced with how this relates to properties and its architecture. So I have a question for staff, if I could, that might help us. If we so choose to put this on the register based on criteria 2 only, what impact does the architecture have on a decision or on Mills Act conditions? Is that a lower standard for architecture because it's recognizable enough, and so we don't really pay too much attention to additions, or can you give us a little guidance on that?
Yeah, and this is kind of fresh turf for us. So for me, going back to the National Register Bulletin that talks about how do you identify the significance of people associated with properties, one of the thresholds is that if that person were to return to us today, would they recognize their house? And I think that's one of the crux issues here, because I think the answer is yes and no. It's not as clear cut as it would be in a lot of cases where a house is completely remodeled and you can't even recognize it, where this has pieces that are definitely there, but it is significantly changed from what it originally looked like, its presence on the street. And then in terms of how we would regulate a house that was just designated based on Criterion 2, which I'm blanking if we have any. I don't think we do, going back all the way to the beginning of the register. We would probably kind of regulate it at staff level as changes are proposed over the years in kind of a stability mode. Let's keep it where it was around the time of designation, with realistic changes as needed. You do have an option to recommend very dramatic changes that could bring this back closer to its original appearance, but I don't think that's feasible for the owners. I don't think that would make a lot of sense. And in fact, we wouldn't be able to tell someone to tear down a garage unless there was an ability to build a new garage, which on this site I don't think there is. So this one's complicated for you guys. Staff left the conclusion in the staff report a little open-ended because we weren't, since you're kind of charting new ground here, And that's one of the things boards and commissions do when we have these complicated situations, is help kind of establish precedent for how we treat similar properties in the future.
So I think at a certain level, we're not in such bad shape because it's not like a house. I mean, there's a house on my block that was exactly as you described, a minimal traditional at one point in time, and then somebody came in and decided they wanted to live in a Spanish house. And so if that owner came back, they definitely would not recognize their house at all. But I think with this one, I do think, you know, it's recognizable, right? It's the main features are there. Probably under designation, that garage would not have been allowed. And just to kind of thinking about what you just said, Jay, you know, what we do in historic districts for homes that are non-contributors is we say basically, yes, you know, all houses can make changes over time, but the non-contributors, we try as much as possible when changes are requested to, like, don't make them worse than they were than they got designated and bring them back as much as possible. So I don't think this house is in a condition where we would, in my opinion, that if we said, let's just try to keep it as it is, and maybe as changes are requested over time, if we can bring them back to more original, you know, to what would have been more in line with the original home, then look at it that way. But yeah, I mean, the house in terms of considering a Mills Act designation, in my opinion, I think it does rise to the level of Criterion 2, and in my opinion, the house still needs to be maintained over time. And those original elements of the house do need to be maintained over time. And part of the Mills Act designation is to give, you know, property owners a little something back so that they can actually keep up with that. Even simple things like, you know, paint jobs or restoring original windows. I think, were we looking at wood or steel windows here? I don't remember exactly.
Mixture of
combination.
wood windows.
I mean, those things need to be maintained in perpetuity, and I think that's part of what the Mills Act intends to do.
Is this a non-contributing structure or a contributing structure?
It's not in the district, yeah.
Oh, I thought.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, I think you were saying it's like a non-contributor.
I was just trying to make an analogy to a non-contributor in a historic district, where if it's a non-contributing home, we say, you know, you're still part of the district, but if you want to make changes over time, you know, they still have to sort of be in keeping with, like, you can't make the house more non-contributing than it already is. You know, you sort of keep it where it is or try to bring it back to what it may have looked like before it was so drastically changed.
But I think the commission does need to think about what's the intent of the Mills Act on a statewide level, and why are we seeing it as a public benefit to give property tax reductions to homeowners, property owners, in terms of what are we gaining through that? And I think that's kind of the crux question, without me having a direct answer for what the right way to proceed is. But and then also thinking about the precedent of what we've asked from other property owners who are looking for the Mills Act in terms of the conditions we've applied for those properties, which are usually with the goal of returning them to the character that they had that was lost through whatever alteration you're trying to mitigate. So.
Right, and that's the difficult question, because we're not designating it on the house.
Right, we're not doing criteria 3, we're doing criteria 2.
So we're
Right,
saying, well, go ahead.
Well, I think there's things like, you know, if the garage presents obviously the largest addition and probably farthest from matching the architecture of the home in scale, mass. I mean, you take all those categories and it's a little overwhelming. But if really there's nothing we can do about the garage, because by code you need a garage, and like you say, you can't build another one anywhere in this house, there are still some simple things I think we could ask them to do that would bring the house back a little bit more, like the front door.
Right.
Easy replacement, and probably should be replaced. That door doesn't fit the house at all. If some of the windows that could be more original and those could be switched out. There's one facade on the, I don't know if that would be the east or the south. I'm not sure what direction that's headed, but on the right side of the house, a long wall that has no penetrations in it all, putting a window or two in that could help. So, no?
Well, no, that's where it would help the design.
Yes.
But what is the goal of that in terms of bringing it? It's not taking it further away from the Baker appearance, but it's a design-based decision rather than a historically based decision, which generally Mills Act conditions are historically based. So.
Oh, so just leave it if it's an addition that was approved.
I'm just throwing that out there because, I probably, because I think every Mills Act condition that we've ever applied, or the commission has ever applied, is based on taking something. You know, if you have a portion of a house that you think is a little ugly, but it's an original ugly thing, we leave it in place.
Keep it ugly. Yeah.
And
well,
so
consider the house. I think it was Hillcrest.
with the
Tudor style
spiral
with
stair.
No, Tudor style with the long facade without any penetrations. There had been a poor addition, and we had recommended. It's I think Cumberland and. Hillcrest? What is that?
Cumberland. Oh, the mid-century Tudor, the later Tudor. It was like a 1950s.
Yeah, that was where we replaced garage doors at the corner.
So above the facade above that, the garage doors. Do you remember it was a long blank stark wall, and we either had to add Tudor wood to the exterior or a window to break that up.
I don't remember that I don't even know that became a condition.
I mean,
I know they changed the garage doors, and I remember there was a break in the wall where we could say this is where the original ended, and here's the addition. But I thought we lived with that.
Did we? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. Well, anyway, those are a few simple questions.
Right now, this is my opinion about this. Well, first of all, it's like utterly, like I feel charmed to hear the Art Baker story, because I come from a family where the golden age of TV, which I'm pleased to have witnessed myself, it was like a sport in my family to watch all those shows. And I remember you asked for it very well, and I don't remember Art Baker, I have to admit, but I remember the show. So somewhere in there, there was an Art Baker experience in my childhood. And, I think you've done an excellent job of convincing us, well, certainly me, that he's a significant person, not only here locally, but nationally, and that Criterion number 2 applies. I think that unlike the house on Royal, where there's a way we can find our way into a Mills Act solution to some of the issues, I'm not sure that there is a way to do that with your house. And I love the video of Art's daughter recalling a lot of the things. Many of the things that she recalled so poignantly were inside the house. We're looking at the outer skin of the house for the most part. She did make note of what used to be there, and she noticed the differences, and she noticed what resonated with her. And our concerns are, much to my consternation, I wish the whole house inside and out could be considered in these things, but we look at the outside of the house, and you can nod either like this or like this as I'm talking, but I don't see a way to solve the problem of the house's changes through the Mills Act. I think they would be too drastic and as has already been commented, impossible almost to go back to that, take that addition off. Why would we even want to do that? The house is lovely the way it is. Nobody's saying it isn't. It's still a French revival style, but so many changes have been made, and we don't want to take those away, and you probably don't either. So I see a landmark designation. I just don't see a Mills Act contract here, except if we were to ask for some minor changes, and I don't know whether that, the point that Commissioner Shire made about how do we handle architectural modifications under a Mills Act contract if the architecture isn't part of the application. So I'm not sure what we can do here.
So can I, do you want to go?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say something quickly. If there are multiple criterions that we can consider and approve under, and Mills Act does apply to each one of those standalone, then it's really giving tax benefits to keep the property updated, maintained,
maybe tweak some of the
restored
things.
as it needs to over
Right.
The next 100 years. It's less about does the architecture fit today. If we truly nominate it only under an important prominent person, you want the house to be there so you can always enjoy this important prominent person that's given so much to Glendale and California and nationally. So I think that's how you look at the Mills Act in this situation. It's not because they need to do things specifically. Oftentimes we approve houses and there's not a condition at all. They're like perfect,
Done.
intact,
It's
and they still
done.
get the Mills Act because they're
Right.
going to maintain it for years to come.
Right. Okay. So that's kind of where we're at in the majority. So now we need to discuss if we're going to look at a Mills Act under criteria 2, what are we going to focus on? Is there anything?
Well, staff has already listed the things that they thought
Can
should
we
be
go
changed
over
back.
that again? Just to revisit.
Yeah, you had presented.
I don't remember doing
You
that.
did.
Yeah.
And even down to the brick wall and
Oh, we talked about
Page 5 of 5.
areas that could.
last paragraph. Page
Oh, right, yeah, of course, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we listed the following as possibilities for the commission to consider: replacement of non-original windows, removal of the brick and iron fence adjacent to the garage, installation of an appropriate front door. All of those are the things that we listed. One thought would be, especially with windows, we put that in because there are obvious replacement windows. We would allow that in a non-contributing building in a district, and we don't know exactly what was. I can't remember if we saw any original windows. Do you remember, Christina?
There are a few.
There are a few.
And original French doors.
Okay. Those are.
The back has some.
Okay. We'd have to look at windows much more carefully, but one thought would be to focus also on just making the house, the parts of the house that we know Art Baker would recognize if he walked down the street, make those more visible. And some of that could be through landscaping changes. Some of that could be with the iron fence, kind of separating the house from the street when it used to be quite open to the street. And there may be other things to consider. And you do have full purview, so even if I'm suggesting it's hard for me to justify punching new window openings in the house as part of a Mills Act, but the commission can do that. There's no rules for this kind of thing.
So I personally would be fine with replacement of some of the non-original windows if it seems appropriate. Again, and I don't know if we just want to leave that to staff or if we want to look at what those are right now. And then I would be comfortable with, the change out of the front door. Personally, I don't feel that the removal of all the brickwork and iron fence, are we talking about that entire landscaping piece at the front of the house?
I just put it there because it's an obvious change, so you could think about it whatever way.
I'm not sure that it even looks like it was built up in order to accommodate that staircase going up. We'd probably be taking out a lot of soil.
You have to, if the chair wants to open the hearing, you guys can speak.
Yes, I think based on what we're discussing here, if this is the right time to do it, we need to hear from
why don't you
guys. But
why don't you finalize where you want to take this?
Let's talk, and then we'll hear from you again. So let's really come up with a
Because again, I know
list.
it's a tough one, but I do agree. We're looking at Criterion 2, which is on the person, not on the house. So we're kind of saying the house would be recognizable to the person. And so the person is important enough that people might want to come and see it on a bus tour of Homes of the Stars, just because Art Baker lived there. And if this is what it looks like today, and it looks pretty, you know, except for some changes, like the garage mostly, and maybe the buildup of that landscaping, it looks pretty much like it looked when he lived there. I don't know that we really need to focus on trying to get it back again, because we're not focusing on Criterion 3, we're focusing on Criterion 2, which is basically Art Baker lived here.
It could help in minimizing some of the landscape or trimming, so you could see the house a little more original, if that's, you know, and that's just some simple tree trimming.
I mean, to be fair, we have also designated a home that is completely, absolutely not visible from the street at all. So that gets us into slippery territory.
Trimming landscaping also becomes an ongoing maintenance issue.
Right.
When Design Review Board approves a landscape design, it's only approved for 5 years, and then you can do whatever you want. So,
I mean, we could make the suggestion, right? Or what was that other criteria we have? Not a condition, but a consideration for the owners to think about.
Well, you've made recommendations, and I think the question is, are we or are we not going to add a Mills Act contract to the Criterion 2 designation if we approve that? And if we do, what are the criteria for that Mills Act going to be?
Correct.
So can we...
Yeah, I would propose we nominate under Criterion 2. We give the Mills Act, and we have the condition that the front door be replaced. Consideration, and maybe staff could work with the homeowner on window replacement as needed, or in the original parts of the house that Art Baker would recollect or was there at the time. And then we could do consideration also for landscaping to try to have the house a little more visible. So the garage, once again, isn't so prominent and the house so hidden.
and that's landscape trimming, or?
Trimming, removal, I mean, I'd leave that to you with the owner.
Whatever it takes to make the house more
rebalance the house against the large garage addition. That's the purpose of that. So it has an architectural purpose. It isn't like just the aesthetics of the landscaping that we're talking about. That's fine, but we want to bring the house forward and have it dominate the scene again. Okay, that makes sense if you think of it that way. So, having said that, I'd like to reopen the public hearing and have you come up and comment on these things, and also talk about, if you're in agreement, what your time frame would look like.
Absolute agreement with all those things. We've actually talked about those things. And in fact, when the picture was taken, the tree was very overgrown at that point. We want people to see the house. It's been trimmed. It's been trimmed, but there's even there was a center pine tree put in the middle of the lawn, and if you look at the older pictures, that center pine tree wasn't there. We would be happy to remove that tree so it opens it up and you could see the house. The beautiful window on the left-hand side there, that's the living room. There was no trees. We're open to trimming those trees so you could see those features, because we think those are beautiful features of the house. Trimming the pine tree as much as we can so you can see the steep roof line, which was exactly how that it was.
And the turret.
But if you even look at the older pictures, and you were talking a little bit about that brickway, that brickway was part of the house as far as we know, as far back as it can go. So, and the steps were there. They were just landscaped around differently to accommodate them. But the steps and all that stuff, as far as we know, that was original. So,
and
absolutely.
Diane did say when she came and she talked about the front of the house that it was just grass that sloped up. So that slope was always there. The brick stairs were exactly that way. They just enclosed it with the wrought iron when they did the round driveway.
So yes, your recommendations are,
And the
we're
front
open to
door?
all those, absolutely.
We'd be thrilled to do the front
we want to do the front door. We want to do these things,
You're
absolutely.
forcing them in the right way.
Yeah.
What type of time frame are you looking at? You know, 1 to 3 years?
It's 7 o'clock now. No, I mean, yeah, and I mean, we want to do this stuff soon. Maybe if you said a 1 to 3 year thing, there's no issues with that. I mean, it's whatever you guys think is appropriate. We're willing
we
to.
had submitted some options just in looking at just off the cuff, but we would definitely want to work with you on what would be an appropriate front door.
Yeah.
We asked Diane, she didn't really remember. I mean, not
I know. I think you mentioned one point probably a speakeasy door or something like that. We would love an original door, and we would go to some sort of craftsman that specializes in this, that makes it not a Home Depot kind of door, but we want a very prominent door that is in keeping with the house. So yeah, we threw up concepts of different designs and just some ideas, but we don't
Let's just say bottom right, no.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. But we can definitely find one that'll work.
But
that can be worked out.
Yeah, but yeah, absolutely, and we're
get
completely open to doing that, and with the
staff.
Mills Act support and to help us do this and to maintain the landscaping and preserving the house is what we're hoping for, and that's what we want to do.
And to speak to the windows, the living room, the office, even upstairs there are some original windows, but the original windows in the living room have the pull-down Hollywood screens that we would love to restore.
Yeah.
To be able to open those
Those were
windows
great.
nicely. They are all still there. We're just afraid to touch them because we don't want them.
Okay.
See me after the meeting.
Perfect.
Okay, well, thank you. That's
Thank you
good
very
to
much.
know. So I think we can come up with, are we ready to make a motion, or do we need more discussion?
I think I'm good. Was that your motion,
And the
basically?
ironworks.
Well,
We're good
that
with
was
the-
almost a motion, what you had just said, but I think we need to just repeat it now with
Okay.
the time frame. So
It looks like
Under criteria 2.
designate under criteria 2, Mills Act conditions to bring back aspects of the appearance of the house closer to its original appearance, replace the front door. We said a consideration for window replacement. And just so the commission knows, considerations imposed by the board are generally not taken advantage of. So if this is an issue, you should think about that. If it's consideration, that's fine, and the applicants may be very interested in doing that. And that said, some of the replacement windows, especially from the 9-foot rather than the 6-foot, kind of look more or less okay. We'd have to kind of inventory what's the original, start looking at muntin widths and overall kind of appearance, and then start using that as a baseline for the other windows. And I'm not sure how many windows we'd ultimately end up with, or if you want to give direction on front-facing facades. But in the Angela's house, we're looking at replacing every window.
Right.
So think about parity in that. Then that's an
that would
architectural
be-
designation rather than a
Right.
person designation. So.
Under consideration, because it's not.
So that would be a condition to
yeah,
look at the muntin configuration and other aspects of the windows, style and design, and where we don't have that we would try to achieve that.
So quick.
If that's your goal, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right
Condition
now?
instead of
Condition. Condition.
So a quick question. If we don't condition it right now, is the assumption that going forward over time, if people wanted to change out windows, that they would have to
Well, if
go
this,
back, or
if,
not
this were,
necessarily?
if this were just a Glendale Register designation without the Mills Act, and they came to us in 10 years to replace windows, we'd be doing something similar to what you're thinking?
So
Appropriate
I think it's
external
appropriate
grid,
to
wood
make it a
windows.
condition.
Me too.
Okay.
Okay. So
And then we had the front door, we had the condition for the window replacement, which staff will develop. It'll be a little hard for the timeline because we don't know exactly how many. So maybe having a longer range that we can try to compress if it isn't as many. And then we had a consideration to remove landscape and/or trim landscape to better reveal the house, which some of that may have already happened. So.
And I think that's, after I cogitated on it and realized that we were talking about bringing the house back to its dominance in relationship, especially to the garage addition, which is very nice and compatible, but, proportionally large to what was there before, that should be a condition, to rethink the landscaping, not so much for aesthetic reasons, but to bring the house main elevation into the forefront.
Okay, so we have a condition, or is it a condition or consideration?
I personally think it's a condition.
Did you say we don't condition landscaping except for 5
we're not-
years?
we can't.
Well, we can, just with the knowledge that there's no mechanism to enforce it in the future. So we can certainly do it, establish a precedent, establish a goal. I'd have to talk to the city attorney to see, because Mills Acts extend in perpetuity, but conditions never have, that I know of. Maybe it's a possibility. Maybe other cities have done that, I don't know.
Okay.
So,
Well, maybe
so we
if,
can.
if that's
Well,
figured
the
out.
owners seem willing in any
Yes,
case.
if
so.
it can be
We'll
a
make it a condition.
If not, it's if it's not legal, then it becomes a consideration.
Yeah, and we
We don't want to do anything illegal.
No, I don't think it would be illegal. I think it would just be, we'd have to change the language somewhere else in the body of the contract, not just put it as a condition. So there'd be a slight, so we'll talk to the city attorney's office, see what they think about that.
Okay.
We'll have a condition to remove and trim landscaping to better reveal the house and enhance its presence from the street and its dominance, visual dominance over the garage, and we'll investigate whether that can be done in perpetuity or if it's a one-shot deal through the Mills Act condition.
Yep.
So,
Based on those conditions, I'd like to make a motion. So I'd like to recommend to City Council that the property at 571 Cumberland Road be called the Baker House and be designated as a historic resource in the Glendale Register of Historic Resources, and offer the Mills Act contract as well.
second?
Can we add criteria too, somewhere in there?
Thank you. Under criteria 2.
So there's no confusion. I second it.
Roll call.
Commissioner Vartanian?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Chair Vidor?
Yes.
Very good, 4-0.
Well, thank you. Thank you all very much.
Thank
This
you
is
for
really
all your
a
hard work.
very satisfying meeting for, seeing this beautiful variety of houses come before us, and I hope we can work everything out. I don't think there are any updates or informational briefings. Am I right about that?
That's true, yeah.
True. So we're adjourned. Thank you.